Now, let's talk about nice guy autism and ADHD comorbidity. And that is the high correlation between nice guy syndrome and autism spectrum disorders. I have a suspicion, again, none of this is scientific because nobody studies nice guys, but there's a combination of being on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, the ADHD autism spectrum, and the desire to be a good person leading to that combination leading to nice guy syndrome. Basically, if you take autism plus a love of people, you get nice guy syndrome. So if we look at autism, what used to be called Aspergers and now called I don't know what, autism spectrum disorder, because the Aspergers guy turned out to be a Nazi or some shit. I still prefer Aspergers. Autism usually means a difficulty understanding social cues, reading people socially, social dynamics, understanding the game, especially when you're a kid. The kid game, the Lord of the Flies thing that happens in primary school, and the cool rating system, the invisible rating system that happens in high school, that stuff's just invisible to somebody on the spectrum. They have no idea what's going on. And they're unable to figure out how to play this game. When they try to be themselves, it just seems to be the wrong thing to do in this environment. They get punished for it. Or they see other people doing it and seeing them get punished for it, and they go, fuck, I'm not going to do that. And so they very early on, through traumatic bullying or just ostracism or just a sense of being different, they start hiding who they really are. And because the hiding of who they are and pretending to be someone they're not starts to get better results socially. And when you're a kid, social status and fitting in is the most important thing in the world. It's pretty tempting to develop the nice guy syndrome as a safe remedy to the social ostracism problem. And ADHD, which I do think is just sort of comorbid with autism at any given time, it means you've got habits and behaviors that tend to get you ostracized in a place like school. You struggle to concentrate, you get bad grades, you get into bits of trouble, you do weird things, you got habits, you're into like hobbies and stuff that other people don't understand or that they aren't cool. You struggle to pay attention. All these things are going to make things difficult for you socially. At least they're going to make things difficult for you in the classroom. And then you're going to be seen as a stupid kid, or you're going to be seen as the weird kid because the teachers are punishing you, and sort of isolating you and putting you under the spotlight and so on. Again, you're going to feel the need to develop some sort of strategy to survive socially. People with ADHD and autism tend to be fixated on things that aren't popular or common. They're like weird things. They're not really interested in the popular stuff. They have odd habits. They're hypersensitive. Like I was the crybaby kid when I was, in primary school and such. And, I just seem to feel pain more than others and be more sensitive to cold and so on like that. So when you get this comorbidity, you get these different types emerge. And from the extroverted type, you get the performer and the controller types, in my experience working with clients. So these are the ones, the extroverts, they're able to figure out the game and how it's played. They're able to see the rules that everyone else seems to follow. They don't understand it. They think it's stupid, but they can see it and they can figure out how to play the game too. They kind of decode what it means to be cool and figure out how to fake it. And so if you're the performer type, you might figure out the cool thing to do. Like you might play the cool sports or play in a band or do whatever, be a skateboarder, whatever it is that's cool in your school. You'll figure out, oh, that's the quickest way to this. I'll be good at that thing. And that automatically gets me in. It's a pretty simple and effective strategy. Whereas the controller type will learn to start manipulating people. They'll start to see the game and they'll start to see how to use sort of gossip and innuendo and gameplay to put themselves at the center of things. Because people on the spectrum are hypervigilant and often have like kind of oversensitive empathy, they actually develop advanced people reading skills. And I think this actually contradicts a popular belief around autism that people can't read faces and so on. I'm sure there's some people on the spectrum who that applies to, but the ones who have nice guy syndrome have actually figured it out. They know how to read people. They know how to at least calculate based on all the variables in a social situation how everyone's probably feeling about everyone else and everything, and be able to make moves based on this information, kind of like playing chess. Of course, this performer and controller type can only really connect by being fake, so they actually feel alone all the time. They might have a couple of good friends. I was lucky enough to have some real connections. But the problem is if you're manipulating people into liking you, then they don't actually like you. They like the thing you're pretending to be. So that thing's having relationships with people while you're sitting back by yourself watching it happen, like it's on a movie. It's like it's a movie about you, but you're not in it. That's actually what it feels like. I'd be at parties watching myself be liked by all these people, and yet I'm not myself. I'm like, yeah, they wouldn't like this guy. They like that guy, the guy I pretend to be. But this guy, fuck, they'd hate him, so they're not going to meet him. But it works. It works enough to get you by. It's a pretty effective strategy to fake it. And the problem is, it's not fake it till you make it because there is no making it. There's just faking it. And it all starts to fall apart when you're an adult. So later in life, you become really lonely. You start to collapse because the system that makes people like you, it can be effective well into 40s and 50s, but the loneliness never gets cured by it. And you start to resent the world for saying, like, this is how I have to socialize. I have to be alone all the time to look like I'm not. And if you're introverted with this sort of comorbidity, you get the wallflower and the inner critic types. And I've talked about all these types on a separate podcast if you want to dive into that. So this is where it's too hard to fake it. You don't get it. So this might be the people on the spectrum who can't read the faces and so on, or the people with ADHD whose habits and peculiarities are just too weird to hide. They've been called out for it and they can't sort of pull back. They just can't figure out the code. They might even be in a situation where the school's a bit odd, or they went from one school to another with totally different cultures and they just can't adapt quick enough. And by the time they figure it out, it's too late because they're already the outsider and they can't get rid of that kind of stigma. So they're either forced to be a loner or to hang out in like the loser group where nobody really likes each other, but they stick together for like herd security. Or they learn how to fly under the radar, to kind of hang out at the edge, be included by the kind of more compassionate social groups, but they're not really noticed. They never make their mark. They're just kind of allowed to be there without too much pain. This is the wallflower type. And of course, that lack of experience, because they're not interacting, they're not part of things, they get further and further behind in their social development. They're not learning all the stuff that everyone else learns from hours and hours of socializing. They're spending most of the time in their own head, and there's no help in there. There's no mentoring or support or practice going on in there. So while everyone else is racking up hours and hours of social skills, they're being left behind. And that's when the self-loathing will really start to escalate. There's something wrong with me. I'm different. The universe has targeted me. And you start to think I'm the problem. The idea that you just didn't want to play a game that everyone else is playing that's completely fake anyway, it doesn't occur to you. It doesn't occur to you that you might be the one who's in the right and everybody else is doing it wrong. They just seem to be having a good time. But by the time you're an adult, the eventual solution is just to detach, isolate, keep your distance from people, just live inside your own head, that hell that's in there. See, the problem with all these comorbid nice guys is nobody grabbed them, sat them down and told them and validated them enough to go, look, just own it. Just be this, be weird, be you, but be shameless about it, unapologetic about it. Stand up for it. You still might not be accepted in the earlier years, but just give it a minute. Because as an adult, you'll be the one who's got integrity and isn't scared of being truthful and goes for what they want and creates a life that's built for them. And everybody else will be trying to conform and everything, and they're going to be the ones who are miserable, There's an inverse ratio with like popularity and happiness and so on, which is the kids who like crushed it in high school and stuff. They're the ones who are going to be depressed when they're older, right? I've seen this too many times to not believe it at this point. Basically the weird kids who had a tough time in high school, but sort of stuck to their guns and being like, this is who I am. Fuck you guys. I'm going to do it anyway. They're the ones who crush it as adults, because they've signed up to integrity early. They don't have to make a change. They just kept doing it. And integrity actually works pretty well when you're an adult. You struggle with integrity if you go to high school. But these people are comorbid, these nice guys who have autism and ADHD. Generally they kind of get the worst of both worlds. High school sucked for them, and then they're still fake as adults. And so they don't get to enjoy a win on either side of the fence. You got to understand that this is not a weakness. It's actually a strength if you know how to exploit it. If you are shameless about it and use it to your advantage, there's nothing you need to change. You don't need to join in and play the game. You can actually win by not playing. For a start, you're unique and interesting. You'll start to notice that people become stereotypes and tropes as they get older, and it's boring, it's uninteresting, it's unattractive. You don't want to stay in a relationship with it. It's superficial. Look how popular that guy recently who liked to do train spotting. He'd get all excited watching trains. Look how popular he was, because who else is doing that? Almost no one. To be unique in a world of 8 billion people is really quite an incredible feat. And when you've got ADHD and autism, you're going to be unique. And as long as you're okay with it, other people will actually find it interesting. Not everybody, but the right kind of people for you. You'll be socially intuitive in a way that other people aren't because you spent so much time trying to understand people, so much time reading people. Whereas everybody else just got along thinking that they were being liked and thinking that everything's fine. They didn't bother to learn to read other people. And this is why I think there's so much autism and ADHD in the psychology arts, because we spent so much time worried what other people think that we actually figured out what they're thinking. And now we can use it as a strength. A lot of you can be refreshingly honest and vulnerable and even brutal with your feedback. And there are certain people in certain situations that are desperate for that. We live in such a fake world now, don't we? Everybody's so full of shit. We can't trust politicians. We can't trust media. We can't trust celebrities. We can't trust our friends and family. Everyone seems to be lying nonstop. That it is a fucking oasis, a breath of fresh air to meet someone who can't lie. To meet someone where you know what they're thinking at all times and you don't have to guess or worry about it. As long as you learn to refine it and not be sort of judgmental and unfair and cruel when you express it, you can become the person that everyone goes to when they need a break from the bullshit. And frankly, you'll be hyper considerate of others. You're going to have that victim empathy. When you're bullied and ostracized, even if it wasn't particularly mean, you just couldn't find a way to fit in, you're going to know what that feels like. And there are a lot of people who feel that way as adults. Even if they didn't feel that way in high school, they do now. There are a lot of lonely people out there, and very few people seem to understand them. You can be the one who understands them. I mean, everything from social to business opportunities opens up for you. But in order to make it work for you, there are some weaknesses that you need to overcome or work around. First is just the shame about who you are. It doesn't matter that you have all these strengths if you're ashamed of them. If you're apologetic, if you hide them, if when you talk about them, you're defensive and huffy. If you own it all, then it will work for you. But if you're apologetic for it, then other people will think there's something wrong with you as well. You may have become judgmental and harsh about others. Either you're just not very good at expressing honesty without being too brutal, or after years of being ostracized, you become bitter and resentful and you've got really negative views of other people. You think they're all bullies and you think they're all assholes, when actually that's just not the case. So you might need to get to know people a bit better and find out that, hey, there are some people who would have been nice to you if you just talked to them. You might have spent your whole life trying to be fake rather than trying to find your own communication style. You might have learned to talk how everyone else talks and lost your own voice. You got to be able to speak in your own voice. It's sort of cheesy as that sounds, but you got to stop trying to be cool and sort of back yourself and say what you want to say the way you want to say it and let other people figure out whether they like it or not. And a lot of you in your desperate attempt to fit in will have bad fit connections. A lot of this will even be unconscious. You'll be like, man, everybody I work with is always toxic, not realizing you're choosing those jobs because you're choosing the type of people that you want to fit in with, even though they're not great people. You might have a string of bad relationships. You might have friends that don't treat you very well. You've got to learn to let go of that desperation to fit in, be willing to be alone and ostracized in order to create space for people who actually like you the way you are. And I kind of specialize in working with people who have this comorbidity and developing social skills that don't compromise their integrity, but do actually work in the real world. So get in touch if I can help you, Dan at brojo.org.